Mom! The rice is burning! Weren't you watching it?
I only stepped away for a minute.
A minute? Look at this. It's completely ruined.
I thought I had it under control.
Daddy, Kobe won't stop crying.
Kobe won't stop crying. Mom, Nkechi has only been gone for 9 days. How did everything fall apart so fast?
I thought this house needed me. I never realized how much it needed her.
No, Mom. This house didn't fall apart without you. It fell apart without Nkechi.
Before we continue, if you love powerful Africans, turn on the bell and become part of our family. This house could never serve without Nkechi.
2 months earlier, none of this had happened yet. Tobi Adele was, by every account, a good son. The kind mothers pray for at every vigil and thank God for at every testimony service. He called his mother every single day, even on the days there was nothing new to report. He paid every bill without being reminded, and in 31 years, he had never once raised his voice at Mama Folake. Because Tobi was not just her son, he was her only child. No brother to share the weight with, no sister to call and complain to, no other grandchild to spoil when Tobi's house felt like too much. When Tobi's father died quietly in his sleep, 11 years before this story begins, Mama Folake had exactly one living reason to keep waking up every morning, and his name was Tobi. So when Tobi married Nkechi, a calm, steady woman who ran her own small event decoration business and had a habit of thinking carefully before she spoke, Mama Folake did not simply gain a daughter-in-law. Somewhere beneath the joy, in a place she never examined too closely, she felt something else creeping in behind it. She felt replaced. She never said this out loud. Women like Mama Folake rarely say the real thing out loud. They say something smaller, something sharper, something that lands exactly where it needs to land while still sounding, on the surface, like concern. 2 years into the marriage, Mama Folake had a small surgery on her knee. Nothing life-threatening, but enough that she needed help walking for a while. Just 2 weeks, she told them. Small 2 weeks, until I am strong again. Then I will go back to my own house. Nkechi, the kind of woman who genuinely believed in doing right by her husband's mother, prepared the guest room herself. She bought a new mattress. She told Tobi, "Of course Mama should stay. Family is family." 2 weeks became 2 months. 2 months became, quietly, without anyone formally announcing it, forever. And somewhere in that stretch of time, Mama Folake's catchphrase was born. The one she would repeat so often, it eventually stopped sounding like an opinion and started sounding like law. In my time, women did not complain. She said it about the soup, about the children, about the way Nkechi folded towels, about anything at all that Nkechi did that was simply different from how Mama Folake would have done it herself. It started small, the way these things always do. And then it did not stay small for very long. It was a Sunday, with guests in the house, that the real trouble first announced itself. Tobi's colleagues from the bank had come for lunch, and Nkechi had spent the whole morning making a goosey soup exactly the way her own mother taught her. Thick, dense, properly seasoned. Mama Folake tasted it at the table, in front of everyone, and her face folded into something between disappointment and personal injury. Without a word, she rose from her seat, walked to the kitchen, and returned with more crayfish and locust beans, stirring them directly into the pot at the table. The guests watched, forks paused mid-air. "Food is something you take your time with, my dear," she said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. In my time, women did not complain, but they also did not serve half-cooked food. The guests laughed the way people laugh at something that is only funny if it isn't happening to them. Nkechi laughed, too, the practiced laugh of a woman protecting her own dignity in her own dining room. She said nothing more that afternoon, but something in her had quietly noted the date. It didn't take long for the next one to arrive. Smaller this time, but somehow it cut deeper, because it involved Zuri directly. Nkechi had one firm house rule: no sweets before dinner. A rule she'd held since Zuri was old enough to ask for things. One evening, at 5:45, Mama Folake handed Zuri a lollipop in the parlor, right in front of Nkechi, who had just walked in from work, still in her office clothes. "Mama, we don't do sweets before food," Nkechi said gently, reaching for it. Mama Folake pulled Zuri slightly closer, almost protectively. "A grandmother's sweet has never spoiled any child's appetite," she said, loud enough for the 6-year-old to hear and file away forever. "It is the mother's rules that spoil the child's joy." Zuri, watching both women with the sharp instincts children develop early, began quietly testing which parents' no actually meant no. That single lollipop had cost more authority than anyone realized at the time. And then it moved from the child straight into Nkechi's own kitchen. She came home from a client meeting one afternoon to find her spice rack completely rearranged, alphabetized by Mama Folake's own private logic, and her good non-stick pot moved to the back of the cupboard, replaced by Mama Folake's old heavy pot, because heat makes food taste like something, a small thing. Except now, Nkechi was cooking in her own kitchen like a visitor, checking cupboards that used to make sense before she could find anything. If you think that was the end of it, stay with me, because we haven't even reached the laundry yet. And the laundry is where things stopped being funny and started being something else entirely. Nkechi came home one Thursday to find a black nylon bag sitting quietly by the front door, tied at the top, waiting like an accusation. Inside were 4 of her nicer dresses. The ones she wore to client meetings, the ones Mama Folake had apparently decided were too tight for a married woman. A small handwritten note was folded on top, for charity. "You will thank me later." Nothing was screamed that evening. Nothing was thrown. Nkechi simply untied the bag, carried her clothes back upstairs, folded them neatly, and said nothing to anyone. Which, if you know anything about African households, is always far more dangerous than shouting. It wasn't long after that Mama Folake crossed a line, even Tobi, conflict avoidant as he was, quietly noticed and said nothing about, which tells you everything you need to know about how this house was actually running. She began entering the master bedroom unannounced most mornings, technically to wake the children, except Kobe slept in his own room down the hall. She was really just checking if Tobi and Nkechi were up, dressed, productive, married correctly by her own private definition of the word. One morning she walked in mid-conversation, a private one, and simply stood there, arms folded, commenting on the untidiness of the room until the conversation died on its own. Nkechi started locking the bedroom door after that. Mama Folake noticed the lock within 2 days and mentioned it at dinner in front of Tobi, in the exact tone people use for delivering gossip about someone sitting right there. Since when do doors get locked in a house where everybody is family? But the moment Nkechi would later describe as the one where something inside her simply went quiet and cold had nothing to do with soup or sweets or spice racks. It had to do with her daughter's education. Nkechi had already paid a deposit, 3 weeks earlier, for Zuri to join a Saturday enrichment class. Small classes, good structure, a teacher Nkechi had personally researched for 2 months before choosing. Mama Folake, without asking, without a single conversation, withdrew Zuri and enrolled her in a different program entirely, telling the first school Zuri would not be continuing and only informing Nkechi once it was already done. "I have already sorted it," she said. "You have enough on your plate. You don't need to be troubled by these small things." Nkechi stood in her own parlor, holding her phone, staring at a confirmation email for a class her own daughter would no longer be attending. And she understood, with total clarity, that she had been quietly demoted. Not from wife. From decision-maker in her own child's life. She did not scream. She did not confront. Nkechi was not, by nature, a woman who confronted. What she did instead was far quieter and honestly far more dangerous, because it meant she had already started keeping score in a place nobody else could see. If you've ever watched a woman go completely calm right before something shifts permanently in a house, you already know that calm is never actually peace. It is math. And Nkechi was doing math. Here's the thing, though, and I need you to really sit with this part. Nkechi was not secretly plotting revenge. There was no scheme, no trap carefully constructed behind a sweet smile. What actually happened was simpler and honestly far more human than any plan could ever be. Her only sister, Chioma, was traditionally introducing her fiancé's family in Ibadan, a proper full ceremony planned months in advance. And as the eldest, Nkechi had been asked to lead the planning, present for the entire week of preparations, not just the single ceremony day. It had absolutely nothing to do with Mama Folake. It had nothing to do with lollipops, or locked doors, or a bag of clothes marked for charity. It was simply real life continuing to happen the way real life does, indifferent to whatever tension was quietly building inside somebody's kitchen. The night before she was due to travel, Nkechi sat both Tobi and Mama Folake down at the dining table. Calm, unhurried. "I'll be gone 11 days, she said simply. "Chioma needs me there for the preparations, not just the ceremony day. I've written everything down. Zuri's school schedule, Kobe's nap times, what he eats, what he refuses to eat. Everything." She was not scheming. She was not delivering a punishment disguised as travel. She genuinely, simply needed rest from managing a house that had slowly stopped listening to her. And her sister genuinely, simply needed her in Ibadan. Two true things arriving at exactly the same time. Mama Folake, if we're being honest, did not see the problem at all. "Go and rest, my dear," she said, almost cheerfully. "We will manage here." After all, this house has run perfectly fine before. Tobi, distracted, already thinking about work deadlines, simply nodded. Safe travels, love. Call when you land. Neither of them understood, not even slightly, what those 11 days were actually about to reveal. Not about Nkechi, but about themselves, and about the fragile, invisible architecture that had been holding this entire household upright without either of them ever noticing. Day 1 was predictably fine. There's always a grace period. Mama Folake cooked breakfast with the confidence of a woman who had, after all, raised a son entirely on her own. Tobi went to work, feeling, for the first time in months, a strange lightness, as though a background hum in the house had finally quieted. Day 3 is when the cracks began politely introducing themselves. Kobe refused his usual breakfast because it was made slightly differently than Nkechi made it, and no amount of persuasion could convince a 2-year-old that close enough was actually close enough. Mama Folake, who had criticized Nkechi's cooking with total confidence for 2 years, stood over a pot of the same soup, tasting it, adjusting it, tasting it again, unable to quite recreate the thing she'd spent months insisting she could do better. Zuri, meanwhile, had discovered something children discover alarmingly quickly. That with only one adult truly available at a time, rules became negotiable in ways they had never been before. By day 4, Tobi came home to find the sink full, Kobe's shoes on the wrong feet, and his mother sitting at the dining table looking, for the first time since he had known her, genuinely tired in a way that had nothing to do with her knee. "Mama, are you okay?" "Welcome home, Tobi. I am fine." "Mama, are you sure?" "Just a small headache." Tobi picked up his son, who immediately began crying for someone who was not currently in the house. And something in Tobi's chest tightened in a way he did not yet have a name for. Day 5 was the day Tobi discovered there was no script anywhere for just cook something. He had never once bought the specific brand of seasoning Zuri's stomach tolerated. He had never once timed a school run down to the exact minute the traffic on that particular road demanded. Standing in his own kitchen at 7 o'clock with 2 hungry children and a mother who had gone unusually quiet, he realized he had spent 2 full years assuming a house simply ran itself, the way electricity simply comes on when you flip a switch, without ever once asking who was standing behind the switch, keeping it working. Day 6 brought the burnt rice, the crying. The argument you heard at the very beginning of this story. Mama Folake snapping at Tobi for the first time in his entire adult life. Tobi, exhausted, snapping back for the first time in his entire adult life. Words neither of them meant, hanging in a kitchen that smelled faintly of smoke and something closer to shame. That night, after the children had finally, fussily gone to sleep, Tobi found his mother sitting alone on the small balcony, staring at nothing in particular, her tea gone cold beside her. "Mama, I'm sorry for how I spoke to you earlier." She did not turn immediately. When she finally did, her eyes were tired in a way he had genuinely never seen. "Tobi, can I tell you something, and you will not think less of me?" "Mama, you know you can tell me anything." She was quiet for a long moment. The kind of quiet that precedes something a person has been carrying silently for a very long time. Since your father died, you are the only family I have left. No other children. No other house to matter in. No other grandchildren to spoil if this one refuses my sweets. She paused. This house. This kitchen. These small decisions about lollipops and spice racks. It was never really about lollipops, Tobi. I was so afraid that if I was not needed here, in some way, every single day, I would simply become a woman nobody required anymore. So I made myself required. The weight of 2 years of small incidents suddenly rearranged itself into something that made a strange, sad kind of sense. Mama, you didn't have to take Nkechi's place to have a place here. I know that now, she said quietly. These past 6 days have taught me something I did not want to learn. I have made the same mistakes I mocked her for. I burnt rice. I was so proud to say I could cook blindfolded. I missed Zuri's pickup by 20 minutes because I forgot there was traffic on Thursdays. There was no Nkechi to correct, and so there was no one to blame, either. Just me, failing quietly, the exact way I accused her of failing. Tobi did not know what to say, so he simply reached over and held his mother's hand. The way he had not done since he was a boy, small enough to need it. The morning before Nkechi was due back, something in the house had visibly shifted. Tobi walked into the kitchen to find his mother standing over a pot, not adjusting the recipe to her own taste this time, but asking Zuri, seriously, patiently, "How does Mommy usually make it, my dear? Show Grandma exactly. Don't leave anything out." Zuri, delighted to be the expert for once, directed her grandmother step by step. Mama Folake followed every instruction without correction, without her old catchphrase, without a single mention of how things were done in her time. But there was something else on her face that morning, something Tobi couldn't quite place until later that day, when he found her sitting with her old phone, scrolling through a number she hadn't dialed in over 2 years. Mama, who is that? Baba Segun, the caretaker at my house on Randall Avenue. She looked up at her son, and for the first time in a while, there was no fear behind her eyes, only something steadier. I want to go home, Tobi, my own home. I have been away for 2 years, telling myself it was temporary. And somewhere in that time, I forgot I still have a house with my name on the deed, sitting empty, waiting for me to remember I am still a whole woman on my own, not just a mother managing her son's kitchen. Tobi did not know what to say to that either. So, for the second time in 2 days, he simply nodded and let her speak. Nkechi arrived home just after 4 o'clock, tired from travel, her bags still by the door, when Mama Folake appeared in the kitchen doorway and asked if they could speak alone. No audience, no performance, just the two of them and a pot of soup still cooling on the stove. Nkechi, I told myself for 2 years that I was helping you, Mama Folake said, her voice steadier than Nkechi had ever heard it, but quieter, too. The truth is, I was afraid nobody needed me anymore. And controlling this kitchen, this house, your children's schedule, it was the only place I still felt necessary. I should have simply told you I was afraid, instead of taking your home away from you, one small decision at a time. I am sorry, Nkechi, for the soup, for the lollipop, for the class I withdrew Zuri from without asking you. All of it. The kitchen held that sentence for a long, quiet moment. And there is something else, Mama Folake continued before Nkechi could respond. I am going home, my own house. Baba Segun is already airing it out this week. I will visit, if you will still have me. But I will visit as a grandmother, not as the woman running your kitchen from the guest room. Nkechi did not need a dramatic reaction because the apology itself had not been a performance. And neither, clearly, was this. You will always be needed here, Mama, she said finally, gently. Just not living inside my kitchen to prove it. It was, in one sentence, both the forgiveness and the blessing on the decision Mama Folake had already made for herself, delivered so quietly that anyone standing outside the kitchen door would have missed it entirely. And yet, it was the single most important sentence spoken in that house in 2 full years. Mama Folake moved back to Randall Avenue 11 days later, with considerably less drama than the 2 years it had taken her to leave the guest room in the first place. Things did not transform overnight into some unrealistic fairy tale. There were adjustments on both sides. Tobi called his mother every single day, still, the way he always had. Except now the calls were about her life. Her new tomato business at Randall Market. The church group she'd rejoined after 2 years of missing Sunday service for the children's sake. A life slowly filling back in around her, independent of anybody's kitchen. Sundays became the fixed point. Mama Folake would arrive after morning service, and Zuri would run to meet her at the gate, and there would be a meal. Sometimes Nkechi's, sometimes Mama Folake's, occasionally both, compared and argued over affectionately rather than corrected in front of guests. She began asking questions instead of issuing instructions. Nkechi, how do you like your stew? Exactly. I never actually asked you that in 2 years. Nkechi, genuinely surprised the first time she heard it, told her. And Mama Folake made a note of it. The way you make a note of something you actually intend to remember. And used it the following Sunday in a pot she brought over herself. Zuri stopped testing which adults no truly meant no, because there was only one house's rules to remember now, and Grandma's sweets became a Sunday treat instead of a daily contest, which somehow made them sweeter. Kobe, blissfully unaware of any of the adult tension that had unfolded around him, simply learned to associate his grandmother's visits with something joyful instead of something tense, and would climb into her lap the moment she walked through the gate. Tobi, for his part, never again assumed a house simply ran itself. He started asking every single evening, "What do you need help with tonight?" A small sentence that cost him nothing and had somehow been missing from his marriage for 2 entire years. And Mama Folake, months later, sitting in her own parlor on Randall Avenue, freshly painted, smelling of the lavender polish she'd chosen herself without asking anyone's opinion, received a phone call from Nkechi, inviting her for the weekend, and said quietly, almost to herself, before she even answered, "This is what it feels like to be wanted somewhere, instead of needed everywhere." When she arrived that Saturday, she paused at the doorway of Tobi's kitchen, the same one she had once quietly taken over, one decision at a time, and simply said, "This house is smelling like peace, Nkechi." Then, after a beat, with the smallest smile she had left in her, she added, "And so is my own." Finally, for the first time in 2 years. So here is what this story really comes down to. And I want you to actually sit with this before you scroll to the next one. Fear rarely announces itself honestly. It rarely walks into a room and says, "I am afraid of becoming irrelevant." Instead, it disguises itself as correction, as concern, as in my time, we did things differently. As small, quiet decisions made on somebody else's behalf without asking. And the people we hurt with that fear are so often the very people trying hardest to build something good around us. Being needed and being in control are not the same thing. Mistaking one for the other can quietly erase the very family you're trying so desperately not to lose. Sometimes the healthiest thing a person can do for the people they love is not to earn a permanent place in their home, but to go and rebuild a whole life of their own, so that when they do visit, they arrive as someone whole, not someone hiding from an empty house. Mama Folake was not a villain in this story. She was simply a woman terrified of disappearing, who had to lose control of somebody else's kitchen for 11 days to finally remember she still had a kitchen, and a life, and a name, entirely her own, waiting quietly for her to come home to it. If this story reminded you of somebody, your own mother, your own mother-in-law, or maybe even a part of yourself you don't like admitting to, tell me in the comments. And out of everything in this story, the soup at the dinner table, the lollipop before dinner, or the bag of clothes marked for charity, let me know which one had you shaking your head the hardest. If you followed this story all the way to the very end, thank you, genuinely, for spending this time with me. Please subscribe if you haven't already, so you never miss the next one, because there are so many more stories like this one still coming. Stories about the families we think we know and the quiet things we do to each other in the name of love. Until next time, go home to yourself before you go looking for a place in somebody else's. See you in the next story.